All right, Brian. I don't know if you are aware of this, but there were three other football games.
They don't matter. They're not Notre Dame. Move on. No, I'm kidding.
There were three other football games that were played this weekend, specifically yesterday. And because Notre Dame played on Friday, we just got to sit back, relax, and just watch some football. There's some other stuff going on too, but we were watching a lot of football, and we kind of wanted to take the final segment of tonight's show and just kind of talk about those games and kind of what it means big picture. We can talk about, each individual game, all of those kinds of things. But for the first round of the college football playoff 12-team format took place this weekend. I think that, the actual football itself, maybe people are just let down by that. But the lead up to this college football playoff was unlike anything we've ever seen, I would say, in college football and the excitement level leading up to it. And I feel like the games could only be a letdown at that point with all the excitement level that there was.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But all I care about is that Notre Dame won, but there were all the home teams won in this one, which I think is a point that needs to be talked about. The environments and all of those different things. It was obviously all the higher seeded teams.
The two Southern teams that had to come up north both got blown out.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely part of it. So give me kind of your overall thoughts, and then we'll just kind of jump into some of these games and kind of give our thoughts.
I mean, it went how we expected the weekend to go based on who won. I mean, you and I both picked all four winners.
I think I picked Penn State to get upset.
Really? Okay.
SMU let me down again, but
I know, right?
Okay. It's okay.
You picked them to lose to Louisville, and it just was never the same after that. You just kept thinking, yeah.
I know.
I picked all four to win. I thought Penn State would win. I thought it'd be a competitive game. I picked Texas to win by 14. They won by 14, although it was more competitive.
Look at you.
Than I thought it was going to be. I had it as a 31-17 game, but I just thought it was a game where it's clearly Texas the better team, and they were the better team. But Clemson battled in that game, and it was a little bit closer than maybe it might have looked. And I had Ohio State winning. I thought they would win as long as they handled the noise from the last couple weeks effectively, and they did. I did not see them dominating Tennessee the way that they did. I am not shocked that Ohio State's defense dominated Tennessee the way that it did. I am shocked at the way that their offense did. So there was a lot of the results weren't surprising. The WL wasn't surprising, but they weren't really competitive games. I mean, the Clemson 14-point loss was the most competitive game, and really by halftime, Texas was in control and never lost control, although Clemson kept scoring to make it closer. And there was a couple times if they can score here, they cut it to 7 late in the game, 31-24. And, it was a lot like the Louisville game for Notre Dame, where they scored first and then Texas kind of took over after that, 28-10 at halftime. And then Clemson clawed back in, that kind of thing. It wasn't like a back and forth game the entire game.
Right.
I was surprised at how uncompetitive the other games, really all four games were. I mean, honestly, I thought Vince, like I predicted all four teams to win, but I think I said in the show that we did last Saturday, or maybe I was with Bill, I picked all four of the favorites to win because I just think they're the better teams. But I was like, but I just feel like I'm going to get some of these wrong because this season has been one of chaos. And so what are the chances that chaos doesn't happen in round one? And in a season filled with chaos, there was zero chaos in the first round. I mean, that was the big takeaway was all the teams that you think are better. And we'll talk in about why that is here in a little bit. But, as we'll go through the different games. But, I mean, just big picture, Vince, I think all four teams that I thought would win won. They just were a little bit more convincing than I thought. And we'll just start with the first noon game, Vince.
Okay.
SMU, I thought as a team, played Penn State competitively, very competitively. Their quarterback killed them in this game. I mean, that was one of the worst, and I love the kid. He had a great year. I'm not trying to bang on Kevin Jennings at all. He's a big reason that they're here. Big reason they're here. But he was so bad early in that game. I mean, SMU took their first drive right down the
Yeah.
field.
Yes.
And it's 4th and 1. And
so frustrating.
if he just keeps running on that 4th and 1, he's got it. But okay, the guy's open, that make a better throw. If
Right.
he keeps it or makes a better throw, that's a first down and goal situation, and he doesn't make it. And I think that play shook him.
Yeah.
I don't think he was ever the same after that. And the 2 pick
Man.
sixes he threw, Vince, were terrible throws.
Awful.
And then it's 14-0. SMU's driving again on Penn State inside the 15-yard line, and he has a tipped pass interception where if that guy didn't tip it and pick it off, the safety coming downhill would have picked it and picked it off, and he might have scored. It was getting picked off by somebody.
Yep.
He was just shook, man. And it was unfortunate because, you look at him like, man, I thought SMU had a better defense than that. They do. Their defense didn't get dominated. Their offense did.
That's exactly right. And they didn't. They allowed, obviously Penn State got 2 touchdowns without even having to step foot on the field with their offense. And if SMU was going to win this game or be in this game, they needed Penn State's offense to be on the field. Yeah. You know what I mean? They weren't. They didn't need to be. And then they got their first offensive points because they were put in a great position by the 3rd interception.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point, SMU was broken. I mean, it was 21-0. I mean, SMU was broken at that point. It was so the rest of the game to me doesn't even really matter at that point. Right. Can I harken back to the Arizona head coach? Penn State is still who I thought they were. You know what I mean? They're still who I thought they were. Yeah. But SMU just didn't take advantage. They gifted Penn State 3 touchdowns, and at that point the game was over. And that was the problem.
I mean, Vince, Penn State's offense averaged 4.7 yards per carry. It's a little bit misleading because both of their starting running backs went for 6.4. But that was off of a couple chunky runs. Their quarterback went 13 of 22 for 127 yards, 5.8 yards per play. They had barely over 300 yards of offense. And that can be misleading if you're getting a bunch of short fields, but like their per play average wasn't impressive. The Penn State offense did okay. That game was about the big plays their defense made. And honestly, they weren't really like guys making plays. It wasn't like the pick 6 they had against Ohio State where the kid baited the quarterback and then stepped in front and picked. These were the SMU quarterback. Like the second pick 6, it's like there's not an SMU player around that linebacker that picked that pass off. Like just no one near him. He just threw it, hit him right in the chest. And you're like, dude, what are you doing there, buddy? And it was unfortunate because I thought the rest of the Penn State or the SMU team played well. I thought that, they had their receivers had some success in the game when they were getting the football. I thought their defense had success shutting Penn State down early, but eventually their defense was like, good Lord, man. Like, I don't know what we're supposed to do here. We're shutting them down. And eventually it's just they kind of wore them down a little bit, and it was unfortunate because I thought that game would be more competitive. I did have Penn State winning. I think 27-20 is what I thought the score would be. I think that was my prediction.
Oh, you're gonna
that's what I thought it would be. And so, but it wasn't. It was over by the end, the middle of the second quarter. I mean, once Katron Allen busted that 25-yard run, broke a couple tackles, and it's like that's a ball game.
Right.
I really thought it was over the minute he had it. It was 14-0, and he threw that pick. I was like, they're done. That was their chance. That was their moment. If they would have scored a touchdown right there, that was their chance to get back in that football game. Right there was that 14-0. You're driving. Everything has gone wrong so far in this game. Everything has gone wrong for you in this game. You score there, it's a brand new ball game.
Yeah.
And they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. It's kind of like the late drive that Indiana had. It's 14-0. They put that drive together. If Indiana could have punched a touchdown in there, maybe it's a little bit of a different game. But then they get a field goal, and then Notre Dame goes down and gets their own field goal. And, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's going to be it was very disappointing, SMU. And I picked SMU to win. I picked them to win by a point. Like that's where I was. It was kind of a 50-50 toss up for me, but I was like, I got to call for an upset in this particular round. And so that's the one that I called for. And the moment was just too big for him. It was too big for SMU, and it's unfortunate because
it was too big for Kevin Jennings.
And look, I said Riley Leonard was going to be the X factor in the Notre Dame game going in, and I think he was. Jennings was the X factor going into this game. and he was for all the wrong reasons. You know what I mean? Like they weren't going to be able to beat Penn State unless he had a great game. And he had the complete opposite of a great game. I mean, he just didn't play well. I mean, the announcers were talking about a quarterback change at halftime. You know what I mean? Like that's where it was. So it was not a good showing for SMU. I still think their head coach is a really good head coach. I think they're a good team. They're going to be active in the portal, and they're going to be active in NIL because of who they are in Dallas and the backers that they have and all of those different things. But hopefully they can take this and build on it because nobody expected that they were going to be here in the first place. And so they still kind of overachieved anyway. But man, I expected more in this game. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Let's move on to the second game of the day, Brian. And that was the Clemson-Texas game. And I guess probably the most competitive game of the four games that were played this weekend. I thought that Texas controlled the game the entire time, but Clemson wouldn't go away.
Right.
And again, you made a great point, way back when we started the show, was that Clemson has been here before. They have a seasoned head coach when it comes to the playoffs. They have, their traditions on Selection Sunday and, all of these different things. They've been here. They know what it feels like. And it was very obvious that as a program, they knew what it was like to be in a game like this. Now, I don't think they had the roster maybe to play in this game, but they still had the pedigree from a program standpoint. And it showed. They still didn't win, but it showed in the game.
Yeah, you got to give Clemson a lot of credit. They came to play. And they took that opening drive, Vince, right down the field and scored a touchdown. I mean, first drive of the game, they took over 6.5 minutes off the clock.
Yeah, I was impressed.
Punched in the end zone. Texas answered with 3 straight, and Clemson was never back in it after that. And then they had their chances. I mean, they had some 4th down misses, some 3rd down chances I thought they should have hit. But, you did have the one bad pick by Cade Klubnik, but then the defense helps you out and you turn it over on downs. And it got into a little bit of an ugly, they fumbled and Texas throws a pick. Just that second quarter was a little sloppy once it got to 21-7. But I thought the Clemson offense, I should say, maybe not Clemson as a team, Clemson's offense came to play.
Yeah.
Which again, and
2 games in a row, I was surprised with Cade and how he played.
Well, he played so bad last year, and he played so bad against Georgia in the opener that you kind of ignored how well he played in the regular season.
I did.
And it's understandable. He was not that good against Louisville. And you're just like, maybe he's not, but that he was great against South Carolina. I mean, he wasn't the one. He was very good against South Carolina. His team didn't help him out. He was great against SMU, and he was out. And he put this team on his shoulders for stretches of that game against Texas and made some phenomenal throws in this game. I mean, it's the best game of his career. And it says a lot about a kid to have his best game on this stage against the number 1 pass defense in the country. I mean, Texas had the number 1 pass defense in the country, I believe, coming in this game. It was either Texas or Ohio State, right? And they are not there now because Cade did a great job, and he just kind of ripped them up a little bit, Vince, and had a lot of success in that game against him. Threw for 336. Those young receivers had outstanding performances in this game. Antonio Williams had a great game. TJ Moore had a great game. Their tight end had some outstanding catches. But my dad and I were watching. He threw this corner out, and I still can't pronounce that. Brenningstool or whatever. Makes this great catch. But that's the only place Cade Klubnik could have thrown that ball to complete it. It's just a gorgeous throw. I mean, he played great. He's the reason they were in it. Him and the receivers are the reason they're in it. The issue, however, is their defense continues to be a huge disappointment this season. Coach Sweeney is going to have to reevaluate that. And Bill Bender talked about this, and I talked about this on Saturday or on Thursday, is when you look at Clemson's rush defense this year, it wasn't very good at a lot of times, but in most of those games, it was against a mobile quarterback. Well, Texas doesn't have a mobile quarterback, and they still ran the ball all over Clemson. I mean, people love to do this. Well, if you take away Okay, if you take away Jadon Blue's 77-yard touchdown run, they still have over 200 yards rushing. They had two guys who went over 100 yards in the game. They got dominated on defense. And then when they needed to make stops in the secondary, they couldn't make them. They had some, just some pass interference penalties were like, dude, that's such football 101. You can't grab a guy right here and yank. Like, dude, like you're there. You're in great position. Finish the playoff. Their defense has really been their problem at against good teams this year. And like they played great for 3.5 quarters against South Carolina. Well, good. And then you give up that final drive. And every time the offense got them back in the game, the defense would just boom. Like they make it 31-24. What does the defense do? You give up a 77-yard touchdown run ball game. Their defense is a huge problem. Texas's offensive line looks a whole lot different when they've got Kelvin Banks in the lineup. We saw that. But they've got a lot of issues on defense that they're going to have to fix. And Wes Goodwin's just not the answer. There's too much talent on that Clemson defensive line for them to be this mediocre, in my opinion. That was my big takeaway. I thought Texas bounced back well from the loss to Georgia. I didn't see any lingering after effects from that mentality-wise. I thought they came out and played hard. I thought them answering that first Clemson score was huge for them. I think they needed that because it's kind of like you lose that game that you just played. This team that you're supposed to blow out comes in and goes right down the field, 12 plays, 75 yards. And what I loved about it is they literally said, I'll see your 12-play, 75-yard drive, and I will have one of our own. It's literally 12 plays, 75 yards. So like over 12 minutes of the game was gone after each team's first possession. Almost 13 minutes was off the clock. Right? I mean, so I think it's going to be a slow, grinded out game. And then, of course, after that, Texas offense got going. But I thought Clemson's offense battled. I thought Clemson's defense was overwhelmed. And Texas's run game was very good. I thought this was I think Sark knew he needed to get his O-line's confidence back. And he did that in this game.
You're not kidding.
He did that in this game.
Look, I have never, at least, I will admittedly say I have not watched every Texas game this year, but they ran the ball better than they've run the ball all season. I mean, they ran the ball with some authority
against a quality opponent. Yeah,
I mean, they ran the ball with authority in this game, and they put the game away with their run game. Like all the conversation going into this game was Quinn Ewers, bench him to put in the Manning kid, all this difference. It was all about the quarterback. Well, you know what? In this game, all the quarterback had to do was turn around and hand the ball off because they were running the ball with some authority and they dominated the trenches offensively. Like that's where that game ended, unfortunately for Clemson. And again, I give Clemson all all the flowers that they deserve because they did what they needed to do to get into the playoff and try to make a playoff run, all those different things. And on the strength of their program, they were there and they weren't daunted by the task. But just Texas is a better football team, and they just physically beat Clemson's defense. In my opinion, that's where it came from.
That's what a playoff game is supposed to look like, though.
Yeah,
agreed. Good football teams where the higher seeded team is just better.
Yeah,
but the other team who is not as good, but battled their way in, competes. That's what a playoff game is supposed to look.
Yeah, 100%.
A first round playoff game is supposed to look.
Yeah, right. Let's spin it forward to the night game.
That is not what a playoff game is supposed to look like.
No. Which I think the reason it was the night game, right, was because, it's the Big Ten, it's the SEC.
It was the marquee matchup of the first round. I mean, if Clemson was better, that would have been the marquee matchup. But we all looked at Clemson and was like, they're not going to compete with Texas. And
they're the 12. They backed into it.
They backed into it in the sense that they needed to win their conference title. I mean, they're the one team that earned it, right? They're the one team in the first round that earned their right to the playoff by an automatic bid, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Agreed.
But they needed that to get in because they weren't getting in otherwise. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
And they competed and all that, but like Tennessee there was no team that was more overwhelmed by the environment than Tennessee was. Like I said, SMU's quarterback was overwhelmed by the moment. Tennessee's football team was overwhelmed
the whole program.
by them. And the only kid that I thought battled was the quarterback. Now he's got a long way to go when it comes to reading a defense and timing and and decision making and all that. He's still a young kid in that regard, but Nico played his tail off. I mean, and he competed, but he didn't get a lot of help.
Oh man,
He was running for his life his
Yeah.
whole night, man. And
Yeah.
and their defense, like as I said before, Vince, I'm not surprised that that Tennessee's offense struggled to move the ball on Ohio State. I said it before the game. This is not a very good Tennessee offense. They're only averaging what they're averaging because they scored like 60 points a game in the first 3 games,
right,
against like, what was it? It was like Chattanooga, NC State, who stinks. I said before the season they were going to be overrated. They were overrated. And then Kent State, who literally is the worst FBS football team in the country. They went 0-12 this year, and their closest game was a 2-point home loss to Ball State, who fired their coach, and they lost it by 6 at home to a Division I AA team.
yeah,
right. I mean, that's who they destroyed. And then after that, Tennessee, so we talked about this, 25 against Oklahoma, 14 against Arkansas, 23 against Florida in overtime, by the way, 24 against Bama, 28 against Kentucky, 33 against a Mississippi State team whose defense is really bad and gives up 34. Like their 33 was below Mississippi State's season average allowed. 17 against Georgia, scored 56 against UTEP. Again, a team that stinks, a team that went 2-10 this year, and gave up 32 points a game. And then they scored 36 against Vanderbilt, but they spotted Vanderbilt a 17-0 lead. You're not going to do that to Ohio State and come back. And that's exactly what they did. What surprised me, Vince, was how their defense got absolutely annihilated by Ohio State. They just got absolutely destroyed by Ohio State's offense. And part of that is great scheme, but Will Howard, who I'm not a fan of, that, threw some dimes in this game. That first touchdown pass, Jeremiah Smith, set the tone for this game. Like, Will Howard was feeling it against Tennessee.
Yeah, look, I'm not a Will Howard fan, but
you got to give credit where
he
credit
probably
is
played
due,
his best game of the year.
He was great.
I mean, he was really, really good.
He was great.
He was. And he came out ready for that game. I mean, I'm a very emotional person when it comes to, some of my likes and dislikes with teams and certain players and some things like that. But I will tip my cap when I see a well-played game or whatever. And that was
excellence is excellence, Vince. I don't care whatever
really
you think about a kid coming into a game. Excellence. Hey, look, Timmy Smith never had a good game before or after Super Bowl 22. But that game, he was brilliant. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And you could see it from early on. You could see Will Howard is feeling it early on, and you could see the game plan was to have Will Howard come out and go after him. And look, we said before the game, I've been saying it all year, Vince, SEC secondaries are not good this year outside of Texas. There just aren't a lot of good secondaries in the SEC that are good this year. Georgia's hasn't been very good. LSU stinks. Ole Miss's is solid. That's probably the best of all those teams. Tennessee's isn't very good, but I didn't think it was going to be like this. I thought Ohio State was going to have some success throwing the football. I thought they'd win like 27-20, 24-21. Like, I thought it'd be that kind of game where they'd hit a couple big throws. But I did not see this coming where they just torched them. And if it wasn't for them kind of going away from what worked in the first quarter, in the second quarter, it might have been worse. And they kind of let Tennessee crawl back in a little bit. But Ohio State came out that third quarter, Vince, and said, nope, this ain't happening. Y'all are not coming back in this game. We're going to absolutely steamroll you. And that's what they did. I mean, they started great in the first quarter, and they were great coming out of halftime.
Yeah.
And that game was over very early. I mean, forced a quick punt by Tennessee. That's the thing, Vince, is like they scored to make it 21-10, went on a nice long drive, punched it in at the end, 21-10, and then you start with the ball in the second half. It's like, okay, if they go down and score, this could get real interesting. And Ohio State shut them down, and then their offense went right down the field. Yeah. And again, went right back to Will Howard. But they also, Jeremiah Smith, but they also had some complimentary players step up in this game, Vince. I mean, yes, Jeremiah Smith went off and Emeka went off, but G. Scott had some really big catches in this game. Travion was good out of the backfield. He had one of his best games. He had 134 yards of offense and 2 touchdowns. Quinshon Judkins was typical Quinshon Judkins. He grinds out a couple yards, and he's just not that guy. But a couple short yardage touchdowns. But like their dudes played like dudes. Yeah. Jeremiah was a dude. Emeka was a dude. Travion was a dude. And Will Howard played the game of his career.
Did.
I mean,
look, if they play this way in the next round,
they could beat Oregon.
Oregon's in trouble.
Look, yeah, I get you. Yeah,
I think
they'll win if they play.
We're going to talk about all this obviously later on, but like I think Penn State showed some cracks in the Oregon armor a little bit that I think Ohio State could take advantage of. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
But we'll get to those kind of games.
Yeah, but this is what everybody thought Ohio State was going to look like.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think
now,
they
is this the beginning of things to come, or was this sort of just they were feeling it
and they were at home and all of those things?
Yeah,
I totally get that.
And I don't ever want to ever hear an Ohio State fan talk to a Notre Dame fan again about how Notre Dame Stadium gets overrun by opposing fans ever again. This was worse than Nebraska 2000. It was worse than that. I mean, that was wild how many Tennessee fans. But you know what Ohio State's players did? Well, we're not going to let them cheer about anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
nothing.
Yeah,
and that was without a doubt the most impressive performance that we saw in the playoff. Now, and we're going to talk about what all this means here next, Vince. But that was the most impressive. Here's how I'd rank the performance as far as just kind of dominance. I would say, I'd go Ohio State had the most dominant performance, no question.
I agree.
I think Notre Dame was next. I think Penn State was next, and Penn State was dominant on one side of the ball. The difference between Notre Dame and Ohio State and Penn State is Notre Dame and Ohio State dominated on both sides of the ball.
Yep.
Penn State did not play very well on offense. Their defense, they didn't need to. And then Texas was the least dominant, but that's because their opponent played the best.
Yeah.
Like Clemson played really well. I mean, again, like I said, some of the throws that they beat that Texas secondary on were just, I don't know what you're supposed to do about that.
Yeah.
Like that was just a great throw and catch by the quarterback. And that's what there were some throws that Cade made in that game where if you're Coach Kwiatkowski, the D coordinator at Texas, you're just kind of tipping your cap to Cade and being like, I don't know what to do about that. You know what I mean? Like it just was a great play. So their level of dominance was lower, but I think they, as a team, still played well. Texas did, but just level of dominance, I put them fourth in that one.
Yeah, for sure. Now it's interesting now that you kind of take a step. Okay, here's the next level, right? And all the favorites. It was all chalk this weekend, right? It was all chalk. Now you've got a situation where I think you could make a case where all four underdogs by seed. Okay, I'm going by seed. I'm not going by Vegas right now, but underdogs by seed could win this next round. Like it's kind of wild the way this thing sets up.
Well, what it showed was, Vince, and this is going to segue into what I really want to talk about here.
Okay,
which is what we saw in this game is there's some teams at the top that are just way better than everybody else. And I said it before the playoffs. There's 5 teams that I think have a shot to win a championship. It's and I'll just go in order of their seed: Oregon, Georgia, Texas, Notre Dame, Ohio State. Those are the 5 that I think can win it all.
Okay.
What?
No, when you said Penn State, I was
like, what? No,
I was like breaks.
Yeah, Ohio State, because I was going to order seed. No, Notre Dame, and then Ohio State. Those are the 5 that I think have a shot to win it all. Like can win 3-4 games. Obviously, the higher seeds only got to win 3. Those teams I think are capable of winning a championship. And then I think Penn State's next, and then there's a drop off the other teams that were in the playoff.
That's fair.
There just is. And what we saw, now we'll talk about what the media talked about, or I shouldn't even say media, what the ESPN said, because there was a lot of, I was surprised at how many national media were crushing ESPN all weekend. And like, there's a guy from On3, Ari Weiserman. Never really heard of him before. I've watched a couple podcasts he's done with Andy Staples, and fair guy. Actually ate dinner right beside Ange and I at the game, by the way. He was being real polite. Like he grabbed his food and there wasn't a place, and so he was eating. And so Angela and I moved down and, hey, go ahead here. And he's very polite. But he was going at ESPN and people and the SEC people talking about this. But here's what you saw in the first round was the double-edged sword of a 12-team playoff. Because there has never been and likely will never be 12 teams capable of winning a championship. And if there ever is a year where there is 12, it's because the rules of the game have torn everybody down to where there's just 12 mediocre football teams in the playoffs.
Right.
There never will be and never has been unless they ruin the game, more than at the most 6 or 7 teams. Very rare occasion, an 8th team that can truly compete for a championship. If you and I went back over time, I'm pretty sure there's years we could find 8 teams capable of winning a championship.
Sure.
There's never going to be more than that. There's definitely never going to be 12. This year, I think there's 5. And so what this 12-team playoff has done is it has accomplished its mission of making a more entertaining and engaging regular season.
Sure.
I got that wrong. I thought it was going to cheapen the regular season by saying, well, wins and losses don't matter. The way the committee chose the 12 teams made it matter. If they would have put in a bunch of 3-loss SEC teams, it would have cheapened the regular season. Flat out. But the point is there was a lot of teams going into those final weekends that had a shot to play. Bama didn't deserve to be in. Why? Because of the late November win against lost to Oklahoma. Had they won that game, they would have been able to play themselves in, even though in past years they're done after losing to Vanderbilt.
I think they're in. If they beat Oklahoma, I think
they're in.
They make
and
it
they
in.
should have been in.
Yeah.
They would have deserved to be in.
Correct.
10-2 Alabama is more deserving of SMU and would have been more deserving of an 11-1 Indiana team, in my opinion.
Yeah, sure.
Because they
you
can't lose by 21 points to a crap. Oh, you can't lose by 21 points to anybody in the regular season, unless it's your only loss.
Right.
You can't lose to a 6-6 team who is only 6-6 because they beat you. Right. I mean, let's be honest about that as well.
Yeah.
If you beat them, they're not bowl eligible. You know, and so you can't lose to them by 21 points. You can't get beat by a 6-6 Vanderbilt team who's only bowl eligible because they beat you in a game you never led and get in. That cheapens the regular season. And I'll talk about the whole strength of schedule bull crap here in a second. But when you expand to 12 teams, the counter to that is you're going to have some first-round mismatches. That's number one. That's going to keep happening. It's not possible to just have it. Now, there's going to be some years where there's 4 competitive games, but it's going to be rare. I thought this might be a year where it would actually be 4 somewhat competitive games. The only game that I predicted to be a double-digit loss, Vince, was the only game I got right from a margin standpoint. Actually, I was close on a couple. I predicted Notre Dame to win by 11. They won by 10, but I thought it'd be a much closer game than it actually was. Like, Notre Dame only won by 10, but you and I both know it was not a close game.
Right.
I thought it'd be kind of like the Louisville game where Notre Dame scored last to make it 20, because I thought Indiana would be able to have a little bit more success on offense, and I didn't think Notre Dame was going to have quite as much early success against that Indiana defense. Just they were even better than I thought they were going to be. And then I got the Texas-Clemson score right, meaning from a spread standpoint. I predicted 31-17. It was 38-24. The other 2 games, I really thought it was going to be closer, Vince. But it wasn't. And this is what, this hand-wringing of, like, the SEC and ESPN, they're learning the wrong message, the wrong lesson. They're like, see, this is why Bama should have been in. And I've seen all this crap from Bama fans and SEC homers. Well, Bama wouldn't have lost. Like, guys, Bama lost in November with a chance to get into the playoff by 21 to a team that would get smoked by 11 other teams in the playoff, including Indiana, including SMU, including Clemson. All those teams would smoke Oklahoma. Smoke them. Because what happened to Oklahoma the week after they beat Alabama? LSU smoked them by 20. What happened to them, every time they played a decent team all year? Mississippi beat them by double digits. South Carolina beat them by 24, 26. Texas beat them by 31. Tennessee beat them by 10. Right? The only quote-unquote good team that played a close game was the Missouri team, who's super overrated. So, no, Bama would have got smoked by Notre Dame, and they might have got smoked by more, because I think Notre Dame would have been even more fired up to play against Bama than they would have against Indiana, if I'm being honest about it. But you know what that is? That's a guess, because we don't know how those teams would have performed. But they didn't belong because they got smoked late in the year with a chance to play for it. But this is what's going to happen. But here's the thing that bothers me about it, Vince. It's just the lazy talking points, because let's go back to past college football playoff performances. And let's go to the first ever college football playoff, where it was the top 4 teams. The first round game was competitive between Alabama and Ohio State. Number 2 Oregon beat number 3 Florida State 59-20. The championship game, Ohio State beat Oregon 42-20. 14 playoff. The next year, top 4 teams. Clemson beat Oklahoma 37-17. Alabama, number 2, beat Michigan State, number 3, 38-0. 2016, number 1 Alabama beats number 4 Washington 24-7 in a game that Washington never had a chance to win. And this other game, number 2 Clemson beat number 3 Ohio State 31-0. The next year, you had closer games. Alabama beat Clemson 24-6, but the Georgia-Oklahoma game was close, and the Alabama-Georgia game was close. That's the anomaly. 2018, number 1 Alabama beats number 4 Oklahoma by 11 in the game that I believe Oklahoma scored last. Then number 2 Clemson beat number 3 Notre Dame by 27. Championship game, Clemson beats Alabama by 28. No competitive games that year. The next year, number 1 LSU beats number 4 Oklahoma 63-28. And then number 1 Clemson beat number 3 LSU 42-25 in the championship game. The next year, first round, Alabama beats Notre Dame 31-14 in the game that Notre Dame scored last. It was not that close. And then Ohio State beat Clemson 49-28, a 17 and a 21-point spread. And in the title game, number 1 Alabama beat number 3 Ohio State 52-24. 2021, Bama beats Cincinnati 27-6. Georgia beats Michigan 34-11. Georgia beats Alabama by 15. Not a single game in that postseason decided by fewer than 15 points. The next year, Georgia, Ohio State play a great game. TCU, Michigan play great games. Championship game is 65-7. The next year, 2023, all close games in the semifinals. Championship game is a blowout. We have literally seen this all but one year when you had 4 teams in. And to act like, well, this is why Indiana didn't belong. Okay, so did Bama not belong in 2018 when they got smoked by Clemson? Of course they did. That's a stupid. The problem you clowns have is that SEC teams didn't get in, and that it's not traditional teams. It's Indiana and SMU, not Alabama and Ole Miss. Because if it was Alabama and Ole Miss and Notre Dame did to Bama what they did to Indiana, they'd be like, oh, it's an impressive performance by Notre Dame, right? Maybe some would. They also might be like, well, Bama's not that good anyway, blah, 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 blah. And they would be saying the same crap about if Bama would have got in over Indiana and Notre Dame smoked them. Well, see, this is why Indiana really got screwed over and Indiana should have been in because they'd have been more competitive against Notre Dame than Alabama was. It's nonsense. It's clickbait. It's laziness. I saw Kirk Herbstreit talking about that. You know, and the whole thing is, this is why you got to pay more attention to strength of schedule. This is why strength of schedule matters. SEC so hard. And those people didn't say, almost cussed, Vince. Almost did it, almost cussed. Not gonna. They were silent while they watched Tennessee get destroyed. Destroyed by Ohio State. And let me remind y'all, all y'all SEC clowns out there talking about Alabama should have been in, Ole Miss, and South Carolina should have been in. Who had the highest strength of schedule of the teams that lost on Saturday? Tennessee, number 7 strength of schedule in all of college football. They got destroyed by Ohio State, who wasn't in the top 10 in strength of schedule. SMU and Indiana. Notre Dame dominated Indiana. Indiana had a higher strength of schedule than Notre Dame. SMU had a higher strength of schedule than Notre Dame. Right? If you look at the ESPN metrics, they did. That's where it was. So what did strength of schedule tell us about these games on Saturday? Jack, nothing. Nothing. They didn't tell us anything about strength of schedule. Because the teams that looked the best are the teams that outside of Ohio State didn't have overly impressive strength of schedule. Ohio State was, I think, top 20 in strength of schedule. They're 18th. Penn State was 27th in strength of schedule. Indiana was only 31st. SMU was, I think, 34th. There's only a 7-point difference or 7-spot difference in strength of schedule between Penn State and SMU, and they got smoked. Why? Because it's not about the strength of schedule. It's those teams didn't belong in. And you're going to talk about, well, SEC teams would have fared better. Oh, really? How'd that work out for Tennessee, who beat Bama, who also beat Vanderbilt, who beat Bama, who also beat Tennessee or Oklahoma by 10, who beat Bama. So tell me how you think Bama would have been better, right? Tennessee beat all three teams involved in this conversation with Bama. They beat Bama, they beat Oklahoma, they beat Vanderbilt, and they beat those last two teams by double digits. So all of a sudden, I'm supposed to think that Alabama would have been more competitive? No, Vince, you know what would have happened if Alabama would have been in the playoff? Same dang thing that happened to Indiana. Same dang thing that happened to SMU. Same dang thing that happened to Tennessee. Because the best teams in the country won this weekend. That's what happened. And if you'd have given me some garbage 3-loss team from the SEC who couldn't get in because they lost to a 4-8 Kentucky team, I'm looking at you, Lane Kiffin. You've been real silent on Twitter since you got embarrassed watching Tennessee get their behinds kicked, right? Real quiet now after running your mouth about Indiana. You know what? At least Indiana, hey, look, Vince, I don't know if Indiana could have beat Georgia, but here's what I know. They didn't lose to any 4-8 teams. Just saying. They didn't lose to a team like Florida, 7-5 team, right? Maybe if you don't lose to teams in your league that suck, you might have got in and had a chance to prove yourself. But you choked when you had a chance to get in, Alabama, and you got your butts kicked by Oklahoma, a mediocre Big 12 team that you guys got in the transfer portal this offseason. You know what I'm saying? Like, somebody said this. It's hilarious that the best team in the SEC this year, if Notre Dame beats Georgia, there's a good chance the only SEC team left is a team that they got from the transfer portal this offseason. I thought that was great. So that transfer portal thing is not my line. But that's the whole thing, Vince, is it's freaking lazy. And I'm so sick of the lazy rants from ESPN. I'm so sick of Kirk Herbstreit and his lazy takes. Lazy takes. You know better, Kirk. You know better. And I also was pissed off watching the Ohio State game because the whole time they're just talking about how good Ohio State is. And they are. But that's exactly what they should have been saying during the Notre Dame game. You and I were walking out in the last 5 minutes of the game and then after the game, and all they kept talking about is how bad Indiana was. They didn't belong here. Not a word. It took 5 minutes. We left the stadium till the time we got in the car before the words Notre Dame came out of Sean McDonough's mouth.
Right.
I'm like, did we watch the same freaking game?
Like, that was embarrassing. Maybe you didn't look good because of who they played.
Exactly.
Huh.
Tennessee doesn't look good because how good Ohio State is. But when Indiana doesn't look good, SMU doesn't look good, it's because they didn't belong. It's like people are seeing through your crap narratives. And even national media people outside of ESPN are calling them out now. Nicole Auerbach is crushing them on Twitter. Ari Weiserman, I think it's Weiserman. Maybe it's Wasserman. I'm not sure of his name. I should look that up. That's disrespectful to not get the guy's name up if I'm going to sit here and talk about him on the show. I'm going to look his name up here real quick. But I think he works for On3. Ari Wasserman. That's what his name is. He is crushing those people on Twitter right now. Rightfully so. And it's like, look, do you want to say Indiana is not a team that can compete for a championship? Fine. They're not. We knew that. But don't try to tell me that Bama is. Right? Don't try to give me don't try to hand me a poop sandwich and try to tell me it's roast beef. I know what it is. It's trash. It doesn't belong. The name might belong for TV ratings, but they didn't belong because there's only 5 or 6 teams that can compete for a championship on an annual basis. And I'm so happy to see more and more people going after them in the national media because nobody cares what I think. Except Notre Dame fans, nobody cares what I think. It's nice that people with bigger voices are starting to go after them because they're ruining it. And I don't want to hear Joel Klatt going after him either because his lazy butt was also giving us some crap takes this week too about Notre Dame. His takes about Notre Dame are garbage. But at least Joel Klatt's jumping on the bandwagon of it's the cool thing now to push back on these guys. Let me go at Lane Kiffin now. It's lazy. It's lazy. So I'm tired of ESPN's garbage, of the laziness. And, I mean, even Nick Saban's fallen into it with some of his lazy takes the last few weeks. I got to watch Pat McAfee, clown himself every week and pick Indiana to win. Like, get out of here with that stuff. And I was so happy watching and I know it's kind of been fun, but I liked it, watching Shane Gillis kind of clown them all.
No, it was great.
I didn't know who Shane Gillis was until this year, and so he's a Notre Dame fan, so I've watched some of his comedy. He's really funny. But he was clowning them, and again, I
That's
think he
great.
meant it in fun. But for me, I
mean,
maybe
he
took it a little more
did, but at the
seriously.
same time, he still said it, which is
Right.
fantastic.
Alabama Jones and
like it was.
Did you see when Saban said when he's talking about integrity? Did you see Saban do the air quotes when he's like, "I believe in integrity," and he went like this? I think just naturally he did air quotes. Did you see that?
Oh yeah, I
Go
did.
watch it again. He gave air quotes when he said I believe in integrity. He gave air quotes. It was freaking awesome.
Well, because he got called out for paying players before you could pay players. It was fantastic.
Right.
It was great. It was.
But
great.
you all sit here and talk about how Indiana was going to give Notre Dame a game, and they're going to do this, they're going to do that, and Pat McAfee picks Indiana to win that game, and then when Notre Dame smokes them, y'all are like, they didn't belong here, they didn't deserve to be
right.
here.
How quickly they turn. I mean, there was a lot that look. The popular pick over the weekend, or going into the weekend, was Notre Dame to lose to IU. It's a very popular upset pick. Yeah. It's a very popular upset pick. And, 10 minutes into that game, people are like, oh.
As soon as Jeremiah Love cleared the end, they're like, nope, I got that
that's
one
not
going
to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, it's comedy.
But even the ones that picked Notre Dame were like, it's going to be close and this is going to be.
Oh, yeah.
And look, I'm okay with that because I think Indiana's a good football team. Right? I mean, it's like, and that's what frustrates me, man, is I just get so sick and tired of these lazy narratives that ESPN keeps pushing on the college football world. And they have pull. They do. Their big reason why we're in the predicaments that we're in is because of ESPN. And I'm just glad more and more people are starting to go after them. And because what they did to Indiana Friday night was incredibly disrespectful and lazy. What they did to SMU and Clemson, more so SMU, was disrespectful and lazy. And they're acting like these teams got like strength of schedules in the 90s and whatnot. And not even saying a word about the fact that like all week I'm waiting on somebody to say, hey, Indiana didn't beat a ranked team and SMU didn't beat a ranked team. And I'm saying, are we going to just ignore the fact that neither did Texas? We're just going to ignore that? You know what I mean? Well, Bama beat X number of ranked teams. Well, first of all, Missouri shouldn't be ranked. Get the F out of here with Missouri being in the top 25.
Seriously.
First of all. Second of all, I don't care that you beat it. It's like you can't give me – because, again, that's about perception. Well, they beat Georgia. Okay, cool. Northern Illinois beat Notre Dame. Vanderbilt beat Bama. Oklahoma beat Bama. Kentucky beat Ole Miss. Right? Florida beat Ole Miss. I'm trying to think through some of the teams. Michigan, who's not very good, beat Ohio State. Tennessee lost to Arkansas. I mean, pointing to that one great ranked win doesn't tell me anything because there's a lot of teams that have weird ranked wins this year. There's a lot of teams that have that, wow, you lost. That's the team you lost to? Oklahoma beat Bama. Vandy beat Bama. There's a lot of good wins from bad teams. But the best teams, they may have had that one loss, but you know what they didn't do? They didn't do it multiple times, Bama. Notre Dame lost Northern Illinois. Terrible loss. They didn't lose that. They didn't do that 2 more times.
Right.
Indiana didn't play anybody. They played teams as good or better than freaking Oklahoma and Vanderbilt and Kentucky. I promise you that. And they smoked all of them.
Well, according to Nick Saban, the Notre Dame didn't win by a big enough margin. They don't blow teams out. He said that.
Did he say that?
They don't blow teams. Notre Dame doesn't blow teams out.
But that's what's sad. Is like that's one of the greatest coaches ever to do this, who's just not doing his homework. Right.
Just look at the schedule and the results. You don't even have to watch a film.
Exactly. Just like take 2 minutes to look at a stat sheet. And here's Notre Dame's margin of victory this year, Vince, so they don't win by enough. Here's their margins of victory this year. 10, 59, 25, 7, 42, 18, 37, 49, 21, 35, 14, 10. Notre Dame has 12 wins this year. 11 of them have been by double digits.
And the one that's left over was a score late.
Right.
To make it a one-score game.
Correct. A game they led by double digits for over half the game.
Exactly. So,
it's just like I'm so tired of these just incredibly lazy takes. I mean, oh my gosh. So lazy. Alabama, the year that they won their first title, had 3 games decided in the regular season by less than 10 points. And then there's like, this other dude at ESPN, I don't even know who said it. I was watching one of the games, and it might have been the Penn State game, It was whoever's doing the Texas game, Clemson game. They showed Colt McCoy, and he's like, our Greg McElroy outdueled Colt McCoy for that. And I'm like, out what? It was 6-0, and Colt got knocked out of the game. They were going right down the field on Alabama. Greg McElroy went 6 of 11 for 58 yards. Like, do you guys do no homework whatsoever? You just say whatever dumb thing comes out of your mouth because you know no one's going to fact check. He outdueled Colt McCoy. It was 6-0 when Colt left the game. Dude passed for 58 yards. 58 yards. But you got to be able to throw to win a championship unless you're Bama. Notre Dame's got to throw for 300. They can't win. Keep winning week after week. Yeah, but they got to throw better. They just won another game by 30. Yeah, but they got to throw better. When they get to the playoff, they'll be able to do that. Well, I just did that in the freaking playoff too. You know? Well, you got to throw to win championship unless you're Nick Saban in Alabama. You know what I mean? It's like it's just so lazy. It's like, and I didn't have to look that up. I just knew from 15 years ago. Well, that's the dumbest thing I've heard in a long time. And that's saying something for ESPN because they say a lot of dumb things. And that's the problem. There's too many games on TV. They have too many announcers who just don't know what they're doing.
Right.
And some of their good ones, like Sean McDonough. I used to love listening to Sean McDonough. I don't know what's happened to him, but he's had terrible takes this year. It's like, are you getting the memos? Or have you just all just have this ridiculous group think now that you all just repeat the same crap? Joe Tessitore, I used to like Joe Tessitore. He's a joke now. It's just like you listen to games, you're like, what? Are you watching the same effing game I'm watching? Because I don't think you are. Are you sure you're talking about the right team? Because what you're talking about has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. So that's the big thing for me, Vince, is I'm just fired up about that because they're cheating the kids and the teams that earned it. Indiana freaking earned the right to be on the playoff because of what they did on the field, because they didn't choke against teams like Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. And you cheated them that because you want to drive your stupid agenda. And then when Ohio State blows out Tennessee, oh, man, the Buckeyes are so good. Poor Tennessee. If Tennessee would have played any of those other teams, they would have won. But they just ran into a buzzsaw. They did. It's the most honest thing you guys said all week was that they ran into a buzzsaw. You cheated those kids who earned the right to be there by disrespecting them the way you did because you're too lazy to come up with something original or because you're too big of a pussy to push back on your bosses who basically make you say, we're going to push the SEC agenda instead of being honest. I'm sick of it. Sorry about the bad word at the end. I'm just sick of it because you're cheating the game and you're cheating these kids who earn the right to be there. Because you don't know football. Find another job. Because you suck at what you do. Rant over.
Impressive. I look, can I just say that I have sat through many a Brian rant over my tenure. That's number one right there, man. That was some good stuff. You were ready. You were locked and loaded for that one.
They earned.
I agree.
Kids earned more respect for what they did this season.
Yeah,
Indiana had a historic season.
Yeah,
they didn't choke against 6-6 teams, and you disrespected what they did. You took a great story and you pissed on it with some laziness, all because you don't want to respect Notre Dame or because you want to pump up some sorry SEC team that you pay a ton of money to, who you need to be good for business reasons. Where's your integrity? You have none. And Joel Klatt, sit down and shut up because you don't either trying to pretend like every Big Ten team is good because you have that network now. Sit down and shut up because you picked Indiana to win. So you stay out of this conversation. Let the grown-ups handle this one. I thought I was done.
Oh, it's fantastic. Well, folks, there's more to come. We've got all kinds of shows prepped and prepared, and
chats too.
Oh yeah, we do have some super chats to get to, but before we do, just make sure everybody look. We're going to be talking about the college football playoff and Notre Dame and Georgia and all of that. This is our wrap up of the weekend, and then now we move on to what is going to happen. And so make sure you guys stay locked in because there's going to be a lot of
all
good
with
stuff.
Integrity.
No, we're not going to use the air quotes for integrity. We will do it with integrity.
Sorry. I just thought that was the new thing now.
Oh, okay.
When we say I believe in integrity, we do that. Sorry.